Hello all, I've already done a video breaking down the Romulan Star Empire's heraldry and looking at the surprising amount of detail that goes into its design, and this video is going to be doing the same thing for their cousins, the Vulcans. Yes, I am going to speak at length on the complexity behind a couple of circles and a triangle, and yes, this goes deeper than the superficial image. Vulcan is, of course, one of the founding member planets of the United Federation and has been spacefaring for far longer than that. Their origins as a culture exist sometime around Earth's 4th century from the time of awakening, and this symbol has continuously been used to represent them since the original series and their origin in-universe. It is known as infinite diversity in infinite combinations, or the IDIC. The IDIC is the symbol used to represent Vulcan, sometimes with the addition of lettering or depicted in different styles, but overall the silhouette remains the same, a circle with a cutout overlaid with a triangle and tipped with another circle. But why? I often make the joke that Vulcans love triangles in my content, and this is not just a flippant remark. The image of a triangle features most prominently in their architecture, clothing, designs, and so much more for several reasons, so let's start with that. On one level, it is simply a triangle, the most robust shape you can make with fewest sides on a 2D plane. All its angles add up to 180 degrees no matter how you skew it, and for many it is a depiction of rigidity, sturdiness, unity, and a logical shape. To the Vulcans too, it has another meaning, that being the representation of Mount Seleia. Located at the far end of Vulcan's Forge, Seleia is considered a sacred site, as home to the first sermons from their world-shaping philosopher, Surak. The importance he had on their culture cannot be underestimated, and while not given to reverence, the Vulcan people are full aware that they owe their continued existence to him and his teachings. Thus, the triangle in Vulcan design represents the foundations of their society and mindset. The large circle on the base is the next prominent feature, and, like the triangle, has several meanings behind it. First and foremost, as opposed to a triangle, which is the shape with the fewest sides you can create in 2 dimensions, the circle has the most. Theoretically, a perfect circle has either one continuous side, or infinite depending on how you categorize it. No matter how far you zoom in to a perfect circle, there will always be curvature and infinite planes to its circumference, even when it appears a flat edge. So, we already have the symbolism of the range of possibilities that exists between a triangle and a circle. Infinite diversity. Secondly, the disc represents the planet Vulcan itself, hence the reason it is most often cast from brass, bronze, or depicted in oranges and darker tones, to match the planet itself. The cutout is a little more obscure, but I believe it ties into the origin of the logo too, or rather, a good story was generated post-creation to explain it. The origin murals from which the symbol is based feature a stylized Mount Seleia with a rising sun behind it, creating a halo atop the peak. While the greater disc now represents Vulcan itself, the halo cutout is a callback to this sunlight framing the peak of the mountain where Surak was residing when lecturing. It can also be looked at as the larger disc being the Sun, while the smaller cutout ring might be the silhouette from Tukut, their neighbouring planetoid that often features in the sky at different points of the year. As for the point, which is often represented with a gemstone in brooch form or a coloured point in others, this is the point of convergence of all the symbolism. On a geometric level, the triangle overlays and only this point rests on the background, so it's highlighted. This is the meeting point between the simplest shape and the infinitely complex, the point between which lies an infinitude of options. If you apply the meaning that the triangle represents Surak's teachings, then this point also lies at the tip of Vulcan philosophy, the point of enlightenment and understanding at the culmination of Surak's journey. If the triangle is the mountain itself, then this is the top of Mount Seleia, where Surak himself lived, taught, and eventually died. It is of course also to highlight that Vulcan philosophy has impacted the planet of Vulcan, and this highlighted point is the end goal of being a Kolinar practicing Vulcan. The infinite diversity and infinite combinations possible at the point where they meet, and the finding of true enlightenment. This might seem at odds with the early Vulcans that we see in Star Trek Enterprise, but their culture at this time was being coerced by the Romulans from behind the scenes, and they were arguably losing the sight of the teachings of the IDIC. That was, kind of the whole point of that story arc anyway, and by the time of Spock, they had embraced the full implications of infinite diversity in infinite combinations, while abiding to the logical deduction and the control of their emotional state. By the time we get to the Nivaran version of the IDIC, which now features the Romulan raptor behind it, there are now 3 orbs that represent Vulcan, Romulus and Remus, but more than this, they're arranged at equal distance, forming the therefore sign of mathematics. This symbol is an obscure one that does exist and is used to express the logical outcome of a statement, argument or equation. It is the inevitable logical conclusion that Romulans and Vulcans would be on a path to unification as far as they can see, so the fact it is stated as much in the Nivaran crest says a lot about the state of mind of the unified people. Peace was always going to be the inevitability. As a final point of interest, the Vulcan salute, as it is known, is also a representation of the IDIC mixed with the practicality of a one-handed salute. The V shape between the fingers can be interpreted as a V for Vulcan by those who speak Earth, but it is more to represent as much of a triangle shape as you can make with one hand and not, contort your digits into some shadow puppet-esque exercise. Additionally, there is a second trifecta hidden in the salute, with the tip of the thumb and the 2 groups of fingers mapping out a second triangle, albeit a skewed one. So yeah, not a hugely long video, but one that I hope sheds some enlightenment on the hidden complexity and meanings behind such an innocuous symbol. Stuff like this is why I love looking into the depths of Star Trek lore. Sure, sometimes it might be retroactively added to flesh out an idea, but it doesn't matter to me. This is what the IDIC has come to mean, and its application is surprisingly complex and applicable to real life too. It's both wonderfully simple and wondrously complicated at the same time. Kinda like Star Trek. Thanks for watching. I have been Rick, and I'll see you next time for another lore video. Until then, live long and prosper.